the Second Amendment was put into place as a safety measure for the populace. And today in the 21st century, some people don't believe that or can't fathom it. They were protecting themselves from the federal government, from a government being too big. They wanted to preserve the militias, which were local and personal, protect the local. They wanted to protect the people, which is why, again, in the plain language, it says what it says. Something's happened in the last 40 years or so. However, whatever has happened to erode the social fabric, which is where we are. People will use that as an excuse now. Well, see, because the social fabric's been eroded, we have to then protect everyone from themselves.
Welcome to the Republic Podcast, where history meets scrutiny and facts matter. Join Rob and Lou as they dive deep into the foundations of American democracy, dissect the laws that shape our lives, and challenge the narratives behind today's headlines. From forgotten chapters in the U.S. history to the legal truths they didn't teach you in school. This is your front row seat to get informed, unapologetic conversation. We have an American republic, if we can keep it. Now, let's get started. Oh, yeah. Yes, we are all in trouble.
It's all good. Nothing to see here. Yes, there is something to see here. So hold on a minute. Welcome back.
Welcome back. We've been entertaining
talking off camera a little bit. Welcome back to the Republic, If You Can Keep It podcast.
Right. And I'm Lou.
And I am Rob.
And welcome to another episode. This is a continuation of our discussion of the Second Amendment. Last week, we put you in historical context, gave you sort of the history of the Second Amendment, how the whole reason behind it, the historical context, the arguments regarding the actual language of the Second Amendment within the Bill of Rights, and other aspects of it. Today, we're going to get into the more modern aspect of it, the actual cases that the Supreme Court has have heard on it, some of the rulings, and really the legal foundations of what we now currently know as our current aspect of Second Amendment rights.
And we're going to talk about as we talked about last week, foreshadowing what we're going to do now, talk about the present day views that are often heard in the news and bandied about the Second Amendment, and people who want to limit it or get rid of it, or some people who want to bolster it or want to make sure it's still there. It just all back and forth, and everything now becomes sensationalized. And Lou, if you allow me just a little bit, we didn't have all the sensationalism before there was social media. I just want to point that out. And of course, kind of ironic that I'm saying that when we're on a kind of a social media platform, but that, neither here nor there. But at the end of the day, so much of the social media aspect that people get fed on their algorithms wind up being echo chambers. You don't hear both sides. You don't hear many sides. If there are multifaceted issues, you don't have the opportunity given to you as well as your own research might allow yourself to do. You're fed, as we often say, it's like taking a sip from a fire hose. You're bombarded with stuff, and the algorithm, in my humble opinion, with all due respect, hit the like button, subscribe, because we want the algorithm on our side. But the algorithm generally wants to divide people. It wants to inflame people and keep them at each other's throats. The Second Amendment is a hot button topic. There's no doubt about it. But the actual reason for the amendment, as we talked about last week, is solid as bedrock. And that needs to be understood. Whether you own a firearm, whether you don't own a firearm, whether you are interested in, whether you hate them, whatever your stance on having personal possession of a firearm is irrespective. The Second Amendment is there, as we talked about last week, as a safety component. Now, how is this turned into a political football? That's what we're going to be talking about today. What does that largely political argument back and forth look like? Where did it come from? And why is it that both sides need to just turn down the volume? And I turn it over to Mr. Lou.
Okay. Yeah. So why is it so? I mean, as a former prosecutor, one of the things that people came up to me and challenged me a lot about is like, Lou, look, you're a prosecutor. You prosecute criminals. How is it that you are a supporter of the Second Amendment when there's so many gun issues out there? There's so many, gun violence, gang violence, drug violence related to weapons. That there's so many issues. How can you support it? I'm like, well, that the main thing is that there is reasonable and rational regulations that can be imposed, but it has to be focused upon the actual criminal activity. Everything that we have is focusing on criminal activity, and it's not designed to punish people that follow the law. If you don't break the law, then there should be no punishment for it. But to deprive somebody who is a law-abiding citizen from owning a weapon for whatever reason, for personal protection, for hunting, just for shits and giggles, just because they want to own it, it doesn't matter. That this is a right, and that the rights are out there. The Bill of Rights are there to protect personal rights. That the Fourth and Fifth Amendment, which we'll discuss in other episodes, are again designed to protect criminals
Right.
and protect personal rights of people that may have broken the law. But people are now trying to say that the Second Amendment, well, it should be just, it's antiquated and we should just ban weapons, or we should make them so restrictive that it makes essentially that impossible to ban a weapon. I mean, to own a weapon. And that's not what it's about. I mean, do we need reasonable, rational restrictions? Yes. For people like, things that we've dealt with in Connecticut is restrictions upon people that have previously been convicted of felony offenses or misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence.
Yes.
Okay, there's a reasonable, rational reason for it, because they have already proven that they cannot comply with the law and that they will use these weapons for violence, or that they have a propensity towards violence. So that's a reasonable, rational restriction. The red flag laws, which there's a lot of issues. I mean, is the intent good on these red flag laws? Yes, the intent there, it's a very honorable intent to prevent people that are having mental health issues or other issues from owning a weapon. That's great, but the way that they have been imposed, the way that they've been written, especially in Connecticut, as a prosecutor, now that I'm retired, I can say this, that those laws were essentially unenforceable. And I'm sorry for all my friends that are out there that are, that are in Connecticut that are trying to enforce that law. It's very difficult to enforce that law because just the way it was written is poorly written. They've gone back and they finally revised it to address it, so that, I'm glad to see that they, from how it was originally to now it's a good law, but because it has restrictions and it has a hearing process where people can actually apply to get their weapons back. It's all a matter of due process. And that's what, again, we'll talk about when we get to the Fifth and Sixth Amendments. But that it has to be a reasonable, rational restriction, and not just, I'm going to ban these, assault weapons. First off, there's no such thing as assault weapon. I'm just going to say that.
It's just a weapon.
It's a weapon.
Right.
Just because it looks mean, doesn't mean that, that it's an assault weapon, because there's other weapons out there that could cause just as much damage and that don't look black and scary. But I digress. That, there's just by banning a certain weapon isn't going to end the violence. That, as after 30 years, if violence will find a way, evil will always find a way. If somebody wants to cause harm, they will.
Think about this. We hear all of these people who I believe in their hearts are genuine. Men, the vast majority, they're hand wringing and they're like, what about these mass shootings? And it's just, we have to do something about it to save the children and save the people. And I get, it resonates with people. Safety is always a lovely thing to throw about, but it's also low hanging fruit upon which people who want to grab rights and take rights away from people will use. We started talking about it last week, but think about this. There was no issue about mass shootings. There were no real issues about the Second Amendment more than 40 years ago. And think about, my parents' generation and a little older, they would bring rifles to school, because after school they have, their shooting
Rifle
safety and training.
Right.
And think about that. Now we're banning guns from schools. Back then they would bring them in because the kids would learn how to handle and operate a gun, a rifle, a firearm safely. They would be taught the rules of how to use firearms safely, how to be responsible in your own actions, have accountability for your own actions. And there were no issues. And then we had the issues with Columbine, and then it went to Sandy Hook and issues with, just recently the shooting in Minnesota at a church.
Colorado.
There's all sorts of.
Right.
Now, we can sit here and speculate about all sorts of things, but this isn't about speculation. I have my own thoughts about why people do things, whether it's copycat, whether it's for attention, whether it's their, the internet and all sorts of social media, compounds social pressures. And said, I don't know what it is. I have my own thoughts, and that's neither here nor there. But what we do know is that prior to Columbine, it wasn't an issue with these mass shootings, et cetera, et cetera. So this is really of a recent vintage. So if we really want to talk about and be serious about preventing gun violence, number one, you have to make sure that the person who is given a gun, as Lou said, there are some reasonable restrictions that need to be imposed. And the court, our Supreme Court, has allowed for that to happen, and I think rightfully so. But there's also a large swath of personal accountability and making sure that the person who is being able to utilize a firearm is going to utilize it for the right purposes. And we see in many of the mass shootings that go on, or at least in my recollection, I may be wrong. I mean, there are other issues that need to be talked about, but when we talk about the Second Amendment and how it is today, it's easy to conflate all sorts of other social ills and wrap them in because someone has used a rifle or a pistol to carry out their heinous activities. Maybe let's get to the root of the heinous activity to begin with and why they're thinking what they're doing. That being said, let's get to how we got to where we are in the present day with the law, with the Supreme Court.
So you have, the one main case that everybody knows about is the Heller case. Let me pull it up here. Hang on for a second. It's District of Columbia versus Heller. That was that was the preeminent case back in 2008, where the U.S. Supreme Court said that basically it's a personal right to carry a firearm.
Yes.
That there was a challenge against a restriction within the District of Columbia for people to possess firearms, that it was appealed all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court specifically said that that this is a personal right, and that, again, the prefatory statement for well-regulated militia was just that. It was just to put in context but it didn't say that was the only reason why people possess firearms is for a well-regulated militia. That was putting in context, but is a personal right. And they focused upon, as Rob said in the last episode, focused upon that specific statement of it being for personal purposes, for personal ownership. And so that's where the U.S. Supreme Court overturned all the prior precedent where there were restrictions. Then the U.S. Supreme Court upheld restrictions upon owning weapons in various degrees. And then Heller was the one where they came forward with that. Then you had McDonald versus City of Chicago of 2010. Yep. That's another one where the Chicago's handgun ban was shot down. But that's one where the U.S. Supreme Court said that personal gun ownership is deeply rooted in American history as well as in the American Constitution. And they laid out the entire history, as we did the last time, discussing everything going forward. That being said,
and I'll say that in the majority ruling, Justice Alito wrote, and I remember wrote this down in preparation for this, and I quote, "Self-defense is a basic right recognized by many legal systems from ancient times to the present day." And in Heller, that Heller case that Lou was just talking about, we held that individual self-defense is the central component of the Second Amendment right.
Right. And that was reinforced again by New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, which was a 2022 case. But as you're talking about the reasonable regulation, the reasonable restrictions, the U.S. Supreme Court actually came out in 2024 in U.S. versus Rahimi and said, yes, that restrictions against certain people that fell into certain categories was permissible. And this is one where it was, again, red flag law one, where it upheld the ban, saying that that you could bar dangerous individuals if they met a certain requirement from owning firearms. So for people that are saying, oh, that the U.S. Supreme Court is just a rubber stamp and that they're just, going willy-nilly and running roughshod with the Second Amendment, and no, that's not how it is. That it has to be a reasonable, rational, logical relationship to what your end result is, and that they've done away with looking at the history. They've said, like they've already said, now we've already established that the personal ownership in the Second Amendment is well established, and now we're going to look at what are the regulations that how logical and rational are the regulations as they are being imposed, and not just written, but how they're being imposed, because a lot of people are now passing rules and passing laws, but imposing them in different ways that are violative of the Second Amendment. And the Supreme Court said, no, that's not how it works.
Right. So for anyone out there who's listening to this, and hopefully there are many of you, like, subscribe, spread the word. If there's so many people out there who just think that if you are for the Second Amendment, that means you want complete and utter chaos and everyone to have 25 different firearms and blah, 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 threaten people. And on the other side of the coin, I've heard people say, for people who are trying to ban this, they're trying to, take my liberties and this and that and everything. And it becomes very heated. And we hear about it all the time in the news. We hear about it in local stories. But at the end of the day, again, the founding fathers, just as the name of the podcast here, Benjamin Franklin said famously at the end of the Constitutional Convention, when asked by a woman on the street, well, what kind of government did you come up with? And he said, a republic, madam, if you can keep it. Mm-hmm. And it dovetails with what John Adams said about the country. And this isn't a religious thing. It isn't anything about politics. We say this all the time, and it's true. But there's a certain moral compass. And John Adams said, this country is for people of a certain, God-fearing moral fiber. Now, whether you believe in God or not, where I sit today in 2025, I don't care what you believe in insofar as whether you believe in God or not or whatever. But there's something about personal agency that the founding fathers believed in, that the people of this country needed to possess, and they needed to be protected. That particular personal agency needed to remain with the people and not given to the state or the government or someone else to tell you what you can do. To, as we've talked about, in the name of safety, we need to take your rights of this and that and the other. The Second Amendment is no different than the First Amendment in that so many times people in the government will say, well, for your safety, we're going to delete, all of your social media. We're going to arrest you for saying these mean tweets because for the safety of the public. The same argument they make with the Second Amendment too. We're going to take your guns because it's for the safety of the community. You see the common theme there. We're not suggesting that firearms are something that should be taken blithely. No. What we're talking about here is just the Second Amendment. We're not here to tell you should have guns or not have guns. What we're telling you is our founding fathers recognized this as a basic right for your personal safety, for the community's personal safety. And where we have come with, as Lewis outlined in the most recent Supreme Court doctrines that have come down, there are absolutely, as we talked about with the First Amendment, there are restrictions. It's not an absolute right. There can be restrictions placed on it. There can be bans upon, as we talked about, people who have been convicted of domestic violence, people who have been convicted of crimes, people who have, when we talk about the red flag laws, all that stuff. And those have been put into place in varying degrees in different states. But the underlying right remains and should remain, quite frankly, in my humble opinion.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, it's something we're taking it to the extreme. And again, I know people are going to come at me for this because I'm oversimplifying it. But if we were going to do this and say, okay, look, that, that for the safety, for everybody's safety, would it be better just to ban these types of guns? Like ban assault weapons, ban these types of guns. Okay, well, then going along those same things, shouldn't we ban cars that go over 65 miles an hour because it's been proven that anything goes above 65 miles an hour is more likely to kill more people? Shouldn't we ban alcohol completely because alcohol is
Tried that once.
And we tried that and it made things worse. So I know that's an oversimplification, but I'm just saying that is the rationale behind it. In order to protect certain people, the general public, we should ban law-abiding citizens from owning these guns and owning these weapons and owning these things, be it a car, be it alcohol, be it whatever, because we want to protect people. You can restrict by saying you can't use these guns in these ways, or you can't use these things in this way. That's what the law is all about. The thing is that you can't pass a law to try and prevent somebody from committing a crime when it's already a crime. Killing somebody is a crime. Driving drunk is a crime. Possessing drugs, for the most part, is a crime.
Right.
So by making that criminal, you're saying if you get caught by doing this, you're going to commit a crime. But by saying you can't possess this, you can't possess something because of whatever reason, without tying it back to a personal issue, that's just not right.
Right.
And the courts have shot that down. And sort of circling back quickly about what I was saying before, evil will always find a way. And I'm one where with the military, with my job as a prosecutor, people with bad intentions will always find a way. The shooter in Columbine, they had pipe bombs where they were prepared, where if they're, If their guns didn't work, they'd had the pipe bombs and they had other explosives to carry out their deeds. That for the Sandy Hook shooter, he killed someone to gain access to a weapon. He committed a crime to get a weapon to commit another crime. That so it's going to be something where evil will find a way. And going over to the UK banned weapons. So now what have they seen? They've seen an 800% increase in knife violence. To the point where now they're banning knives. You can't even possess a knife in public. So at which point, again, does it end? By saying that you're doing this for public safety, at what point does it end? And countries have used that, as we talked about last time, tyrannical countries have used that. It's for the children. It's for your own safety. It's for these people, that they've used that to now disarm their populace and impose their will upon them. And that's exactly what our founding fathers created this Second Amendment for.
Right. And again, 2 points. And I'll beat the dead horse. I'm sorry. Number one, thank you. Number one, the Second Amendment was put into place as a safety measure for the populace. And today in the 21st century, some people don't believe that or can't fathom it. Again, take it in context, understand where it comes from. They were protecting themselves from the federal government, from a government being too big. They wanted to preserve the militias, which were local and personal. They wanted to protect the local. They wanted to protect the people, which is why, again, in the plain language, it says what it says. I'll come back to what I said before. Something's happened in the last 40 years or so. And, there has been a lack, or I'll put it this way, there's been an erosion of whether it's your belief in respect for others, whether it's your people just, whatever has happened to erode the social fabric, which is where we are. People will use that as an excuse now. Well, see, because the social fabric's been eroded, we have to then protect everyone from themselves. It's no different than the quip that I saw the other day. I was pulling up on my phone. There's a picture, it's a little meme, and a kid, probably second or third grade, at his desk with a grin on his face holding a pencil. And it says, "My teacher told me guns kill people. I told her my pencil then failed my exam." We need to get back to personal responsibility and autonomy, that you respect, rebuild the social fabric. It doesn't make a difference your age, your color, what God you pray to, if you pray to a God, where you come from, your hair color, your skin color, doesn't make a difference. The social fabric needs to be rebuilt, resewn, strengthened, so that you have respect for your neighbors, the people in your community. And when you have a better understanding of your social community and autonomy, and you respect yourself, and you understand things such as, if I'm going to use this firearm, I need to know the safety rules. I need to understand and appreciate what it does. I need to know all those things go into a safer society. The Second Amendment in and of itself is not to blame, in my humble opinion, for whatever ills have come these past 40 years. It's the person and the sickness in that person's head who has perpetrated the crime. As Lou said, it could be with knives. It could be I think there was a statistic that was brought up in Congress a couple of years ago. I remember hearing, they talked about the crime rate, and someone was trying to ban guns in some particular place or at least put some enormous restriction. And someone said, well, if that's such a big problem, what about hammers? And the FBI data from that particular year, or very close to that year, showed, for whatever reason, which surprised me of all things, that hammers were used in X% of homicides, which was a significant number, which surprised me. And on that panel, they asked this person, so if hammers are responsible, in your view, if you use it, therefore it's responsible, why don't you ban hammers? And the person just sat there and sputtering, like, well, and they tried to pivot back to firearms. Again, the firearm is only just an implement. It's just doesn't have a will of its own. And we're getting a little off track with stuff. So we're going, and I know we're going to get people in the comments, and that's fine. We're happy to chat with you in the comments.
Right.
But remember, the Second Amendment is there, and I tell this to people all the time. It's there as a safety mechanism. And if you look at the history and you look at the backup documentation from the founding fathers, from Madison, etc., that's what it's there for. It's there to preserve a basic right as a safety mechanism for the community and for the person himself or herself.
And Rob's absolutely right. I mean, it all comes down to personal agency. I mean, again, we're not going to belabor this issue much longer, but it's all about personal agency, personal responsibility. I mean, rule number one for any legitimate gun owner who's been through the proper training: you do not pull out your weapon unless you intend to shoot and destroy whatever you are going to aim at. You don't pull it out to threaten. You don't pull it out to scare somebody. That's not proper weapon usage. That's not proper gun usage. That, for the military, I'm not going to aim my weapon at anything unless it is my intent to destroy that item in front of me. And there's, one of the things I love is when people watch these TV shows, or they talk about police officers and police officer related shooting, which we're not going to get into because that's a whole other bag of worms, can of worms. I'm mixing my metaphors. This is starting to hit, but it's, people are like, well, why can't you just shoot? They go, why do police have to shoot? Why are they trained to shoot center mass? Well, because the reason why is because it's almost impossible to be able to shoot somebody in the arm, somebody in the leg. Even trained marksmen, I have a difficulty at that. And what you don't want as a responsible firearm user, I don't want to shoot at something that I'm going to miss and end up injuring somebody else that was an unintended target, or hit something else.
Or not be able to stop the threat. Right.
Right. So anyway, this is now for a time for me where I do make mistakes on occasion, and I am going, when I do make a mistake, I know, but that I said in the last podcast that I believe that the United States was the only one that had a constitutional right to possess firearms. I was wrong. Miss Vito, is the defense correct? No, the defense is not correct. And again, if you understand that,
That's very good. I like that.
Yeah. So the United States is among there's four other countries, which include Mexico, Haiti, Guatemala, and the Czech Republic. All of them have it built in: personal rights, personal freedom to own a weapon. That there are other countries, which include other countries like Switzerland and Finland, which have statutory rights, but again, they're not constitutional rights. So when I make a mistake, which does happen, I will be the first to admit it and I will correct it. So anybody that wants to try and call me out for any other mistakes, you're wrong, but I'll listen.
There you go. And remember.
So now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I gotta say, remember, we talk about hit the like button, subscribe, help us with this lovely algorithm. And also the comments. This is an interactional session here. All of these sessions are. We're not suggesting that we are the be all end all of anything. We're two guys sitting here who happen to have law degrees and have many, many years in the law. and can speak to certain things, but it doesn't mean that we're the constitutional experts and we know every little aspect, and we're not trying to say that we are. We want to have a dialogue with you. We want to be able to talk about things. We know this is a hot button subject. We know that that's what it is. And we're not trying to inflame passions. We're not trying to sit there and, make it so that this is a cut and dry issue, et cetera, with regard to morality. But the morality side of things, in my humble opinion, is the issue that clouds the Second Amendment today. If we had a more moral, and again, this isn't religious, it's just saying if you know right and wrong. 50, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, as I said, there aren't any mass shootings or anything like this. Kids brought the rifles to school because they would have their rifle lessons afterwards or their safety training. Something happened in the moral fabric that started to fray it. There's certain things that have crept into the youth of America, into their heads. I don't know what it is. I have my own thoughts. I have my own suspicions about it. But the gun itself, the firearm itself, didn't shoot up Sandy
It's
Hook.
only a tool used to carry out what is already malice aforethought.
And we need to understand that there's a separation between the actions being taken by some sick individuals and the Second Amendment itself. And people will want to conflate the two in order to defeat the Second Amendment. Again, if you understand where the Second Amendment comes from, you understand that it's there for a safety purpose. And I will shut my mouth from there.
Nope. It's all good. Again, we're open for discussion. Thank you for listening. Again, it's Lou.
And I'm Rob.
And this is The Republic, If You Can Keep It podcast. Thank you for joining us. Like, share, subscribe. If you told 2 friends already, which we're seeing the numbers, and so some people have, rock on. We appreciate it. And here's to the next episode.
And 2 things before the next episode. We had talked about off camera. We talked about you talking to 2 friends and have them look and subscribe, etc. Ideally, within the next, 4 or 5 weeks, we do this stuff. If you made it this far, God bless. We love you. We want to be able to hit 100, 200, 500 subscribers just to get the dialogue going. We want to keep a dialogue open. That's the whole purpose of this country. That's how we've talked about it in prior episodes, prior podcasts, how the legislative branch was constructed. Nothing was meant to be easy. It was meant to be discussion, back and forth and back and forth. That's what this country is founded on. That's what we want to do here. So that's number 1. Number 2 is foreshadowing for the next time. We're going to do these so-called unheralded, or we don't hear about them much, amendments, but they are very much important. So we're talking about the 3rd Amendment. We're talking about the 7th Amendment, which you don't hear about much, and the 10th Amendment, which is now, in the last couple of months, and especially as of when we're recording right now, today, some very interesting case law has come down about the very, very, let's just say, humble and not very talked about 10th Amendment. So some interesting things coming up on the horizon. Again, thanks so much for watching. Lou, love you. Cheers.
Love you, brother. Cheers, everyone.
Shut up and sit down.
Thanks for listening to The Republic, If You Can Keep It podcast. Join Rob and Lou in our next episode as we continue our riveting discussions on the most important topics affecting our great republic. Drop a line for topics you want to discuss, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time.